Nice to see you all again. I hope you all got a drink. And there's wine on the table and soft drinks if you want anything else. So we've got a late speaker. We're going to have 3 speakers just now. Join here, Hanif, local councillor for Govan Hill, has very kindly come along. He wasn't able to make the unveiling, but he's here just now and he would like to say a few words. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Carol, for the invitation. On behalf of Glasgow City Council, I must say, and as being a councillor for Govan Hill, I must say I feel very proud of the fact that we had somebody as illustrious as R.D. Laing, who actually lived in Govan Hill. I feel, as Glaswegian, we don't shout loud enough for the people that are, for our successful people. It's almost like we're ashamed of people who are successful, and we don't think success is good enough or is too good. I do feel in the future we should turn around and speak about every illustrious person we have. After Carol kindly invited me to this little gathering today, I did a little bit of research on Ronnie Laing, and I was surprised, mildly surprised, to see how much he had achieved. No doubt, like every successful person, he had his moments of ups and downs, but overall the fact that we had a Glaswegian who was known throughout the world and was regarded among the top 3-4 psychologists makes me very proud of him. I'm not going to go through the history of all his life because I could go on for pages, but I'm sure the speakers up here who would like to say a few words on him. But I hope that we will not just leave it at being a commemorative day today, but in the future as well, maybe every 5 years, 10 years, do celebrate the fact that we had somebody as famous as him along here, and I'd like to see everybody here at least every 5 years gather together, even for 10-20 minutes, to just celebrate the fact that Ronnie was a Glaswegian. He was, I was surprised at some of the quotes he did, and I'm only going to read you 1 or 2 of his quotes, which were surprising. We came along saying things like, schizophrenia cannot be understood without understanding despair. And that sounds like a person who thoroughly knew what he was saying. He wasn't just a doctor who gave you the usual stuff. He was the one who said you had to understand it, and if you didn't want in despair yourself, you couldn't understand what schizophrenia was about. Another one was whether life is worth living depends on whether there is love in life. It showed he had a very deep understanding of life. And another quote, which I'm not going to look at it, but it's like saying, we don't understand the present until it's almost past us, and I'm just speeding it up by saying what he had said. And I was very surprised at some of his quotes, and I hope that we will now, people who have come here and others will learn from there and actually go and study a little bit of what he said, because I do feel people like Ronnie, and I'm sure there will be other people in Glasgow, Glaswegian, who have done very well. If we study their lives, we will learn a lot from them. And Carol, once again, thank you for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure coming here.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very thorough, and thank you for those words. I'm sure my father would be very pleased that you are here today to say that, and I think it's a very good idea that we come together, or we have a sort of anniversary, maybe every few years or something to commemorate, so thank you for that. Right, our next speaker is Alan Beveridge, consultant psychiatrist at Queen Margaret Hospital, Dunfermline. He's a psychiatrist, historian. Alan has newly launched his book, Portrait of a Psychiatrist as a Young Man, the early writing work of R.D. Laing. I hope you brought some books along to flog, Alan. You missed a good opportunity. So, welcome. Thank you.
much for inviting me. It's a great privilege to be invited, and I've got to know some of the Laing family at Carmen and Adrian and Fiona in recent times, and I found them really very warm and welcoming and friendly, and also they all have an irreverent sense of humour, which I think puts people at ease, and all these qualities I associate with R.D. Laing. So Karen asked me to say a few words about R.D. Laing from the viewpoint of someone who grew up in the south side of Glasgow, who went to Glasgow Medical School and then eventually did psychiatry. And I grew up on the south side of Glasgow in the 1960s, 70s, and as a would-be adolescent intellectual, Laing was a very important draw, and to read his books was something any adolescent who's wanting to be an intellectual would have to master. They were very much part of the culture, and also as well as his books, people with intellectual aspirations read things in the Fontana Modern Masters series, which came out in the 70s, and here Laing is one of an illustrious group of people, which include Beckett, Artaud, Sartre. So he was up there with the intellectual greats. And from my point of view, it was unusual that there was a Glaswegian featuring in this series, because up until then there didn't seem to be a major Glasgow intellectual that I was aware of that was on the world stage. And I think his commentators at the time also expressed surprise. He was from Glasgow, and a lot of the early accounts had him as an English psychiatrist, almost as if commentators couldn't come to terms with the fact he came out of Glasgow. And also, as well as calling him English, they also anglicised his name and called him Laing rather than Laing. So, I mean, we know that R.D. Laing didn't come from nowhere. Glasgow, Scotland had a thriving intellectual tradition. Existential European philosophy was part of the tradition that certainly at Glasgow University where Laing studied. And Laing, as well as his formal education, was in the great Scottish tradition of being an autodidact. He read voraciously, and as people who've read his autobiography, the Govanhill Public Library just around the corner is where he got his learning from. And he says in his autobiography that he read from A to Z, took in Kierkegaard, Nietzsche and Marx. And that might seem like a boast, but in his notebooks, which I did to write the book, there's pages and pages about his reading and extracts from the works, and he certainly immersed himself in this intellectual European culture, reading the authors in the original languages. And from my point of view, it's really very hard to keep up with them. And this is Laing as a young man, reading really widely. And when I was thinking about what to do with myself, Laing's books really made a lot of people of my generation who were doing medicine think about psychiatry. And a lot of people have said that it's on record that Laing inspired people to do psychiatry. But from my point of view, it was also kind of mixed feelings I had, because what kind of psychiatrist could you become? Could you be part of an establishment which could be viewed as repressing people, locking them up, jacking them, what have you? Could you be seen as a member of the thought police? Or could you try and be a psychiatrist like Laing, who listened to patients, treats patients as people? Laing, of course, despite working in an orthodox psychiatric system, could see humanity of the staff as well as the patients, and he saw that when he worked at Naval, but it wasn't entirely hopeless to go into psychiatry. There were good people working in the system. Sometimes the system made them unable to carry out more humanitarian treatment. I think the change that Ronnie Laing was about was brought home to me in a documentary that will be coming out made by Luke Fowler, which he's acquired all this film footage of not only R.D. Laing in the early 60s, 70s, but other British psychiatrists. And it's quite shocking in some ways to see the British psychiatrists in the period. They're all very posh, They're all very authoritarian and somewhat pompous, and you see them interviewing patients using kind of BBC-clipped accent. And the patient, you can see, there's a huge gulf between the doctor and the patient. The patient can't relate to the doctor, and the doctor certainly can't relate to the patient. And then there's footage of R.D. Laing, and it's not the pomposity, it's not the posh BBC accent, and he's relating to the patient as a person. And you wouldn't really have to know too much about the history of psychiatry when you look at these films to see what Laing achieved by his humane approach. And this approach of Laing has filtered through the system, so we no longer, hopefully, have quite so many pompous authoritarian psychiatrists who can't speak to the patient. And I think that's an effect that people probably haven't acknowledged stems quite considerably from Laing, and there's people doing psychiatry now who actually heard of Laing, but are aware of this tradition that you can't be treating the patient as a faulty mechanism. You have to talk to the patient as a person. And this aspect of Laing and communication was something that Tom Leonard, the Glasgow poet, has picked up on. And he knew Laing, and he was interested in Laing's demonstrating how certain languages can be seen as invalidating people if they've got the wrong kind of language. Obviously, Laing is going to be talking about the mentally ill. People might not attend to them because the language is regarded as not like other people's. It applies to people from different parts of the country, different classes. So I was going to end with two extracts. The first is a very brief extract from my book Conclusion, the last few pages. In the conclusion I say, to follow Laing's early career is to embark on an intellectual roller coaster, taking in a bewildering number of cultural, literary and philosophical works. One cannot fail to be impressed by the sheer breadth of his reading and his range of interests. The early Laing was an attractive figure, curious, driven, astute, and possessed of wit and charm. The records of his clinical encounters reveal a young doctor who is highly serious about his work, going to great lengths to try and understand his patients. Most importantly, Laing's burning interest in the patient as a person, as a fellow human being, whose utterances should be listened to attentively, rather than dismissed as nonsensical babble, has had a major impact on the attitudes of society to the mentally ill. I'd like to end with the man himself and his book, Politics of Experience, and The Bird of Paradise. The Bird of Paradise contains lots of extracts about Glasgow, and this is just what Laing in the book describes as one of his many bad jokes. And he's describing a patient from Gartnavel, and he writes, Jimmy Mackenzie was a bloody pest at the mental hospital because he went around shouting back at his voices. We could only hear one end of the conversation, of course, but the other end could be inferred, in general, in terms at least, from, away to fuck, you filthy-minded bastards. It was decided at one and the same time to alleviate his distress and ours by giving him the benefit of a lobotomy. As improvement in his condition was noted, an improvement in his condition was noted. After the operation, he went around no longer shouting abuse at his voices, but, what's that? Say that again? Speak up, you buggers. I can't hear you. So, I'll just end by saying happy birthday to Ron.
You were supposed to talk at a conference today in Aberdeen, and very kindly changed your plans to be here today, so thank you very much for that. Now, our next speaker is Ian Smith, consultant addiction psychiatrist at Glasgow Royal Hospital, an honorary clinical senior lecturer at the University of Glasgow. Ian has recently co-edited essays written to mark 150th anniversary in 1993 of Glasgow Royal Hospitals. And as my father would say, Ian is a very worthwhile person to know. So,
well, no, it's a great honour to be at this event. I feel in a way I'm on a tour, a very unique tour this week. I spent 3 days in Pitlochry this week, and my good wife took a photo of me standing beside a plaque in Pitlochry in the Scout Hut to another psychiatrist, Melanie Klein, who analysed a boy in World War II with OCD. There aren't that many plaques to psychiatrists in Scotland, and only 2, I think, to Scottish psychiatrists. You'd have to go to Kirkwall to see a plaque to Thomas Clouston, so that goes back to the early 20th century, and one perhaps at the Royal Edinburgh to a French psychiatrist, Pinel, who released the mentally ill from their chains. But I think the Laing plaque is really the best of the 4, and I may go and see the other 2 at some point. But this week I've notched up two psychiatric plaques and for my collection. So I think Laing probably has a lot in common with Pinel. When he came into psychiatric practice at the hospital that I work at, I've worked at over the last 30 years, it was at the height of institutional care for the mentally ill in Britain. And really he was one of the forces that led to deinstitutionalisation and the move towards community care for the mentally ill. His famous rumpus room experiment at Gartnavel Royal showed that if you took patients out of long-stay wards who were understimulated and gave them a more stimulating environment, that people with severe mental illness improved greatly. And that was published in the Lancet. And this led to a lot of change subsequently. I mean, in the 1950s, hundreds of thousands of people were in the care of psychiatric institutions, and now it's a very small amount of psychiatric services that are dealt with through inpatient care. So he was particularly influential in that regard. I think also he had a lot to do with the patient movement in psychiatry, self-help groups, a different approach to mental illness, a more honest approach, if you like. You know, for over the years I've been involved with such self-help groups as a relative of someone with mental illness, and you know, I think these also were the legacy of Laing. I like to think, as a representative of Gartnavel Royal Hospital, that his year and a half there was very influential on him, and he had a great relationship with one of our chief psychiatrists, a man called McNiven. He was a bachelor, he was the physician superintendent there for 30 years, lived in the hospital, totally dedicated to psychiatry, helped stop that hospital having much in the way of psychosurgery, ECT, was open to psychoanalytic ideas. And I think that we found a file at Gartnavel where quite often Ronald Laing would refer back to McNiven for references, and it showed a really good relationship with this older doctor. At one point in the 1960s, the BBC were making a film of The Divided Self and trying to send along Vanessa Redgrave to see one of the patients at Gartnavel to help with this film. And so the connections there were quite profound, although he only worked there for a year and a half before going to the Southern General, and then before moving on to London. So I think Gartnavel influenced Laing, and Laing hopefully has influenced Gartnavel, where we're very proud of our new mental hospital, where everyone has their own room, there's no dorms, there's much more privacy, I think, in the hospital as it now stands. Like Alan, as a psychiatrist of 25 years standing, or longer now, 27 years standing, you know, how has Laing influenced me personally? And I think it is about that issue of how do you relate to the patient you're dealing with as a fellow human being. And I think that's, and I've heard him Laing speak eloquently on films about the doctor's dilemma, that they want to give more to the individual patient, but you have to move on to the next patient and put that patient behind you. And I think he captures that very well. You know, how can you be with the patient if you care? How can you try and deal with that? And it's a real dilemma. The famous Kingsley Hall experiment, recent psychiatric research suggests the outcomes from that were much better than people thought. Often dismissed as a failed experiment, but Philadelphia Association, Kingsley Hall, actually when you look at it, people did very well, maybe better in some cases than with standard psychiatric care. The other thing I have to thank Laing for, and a wee bit of flippancy here, that his experimentation with LSD, a book I read said that he once shared a LSD with Sean Connery as part of a consultation in Harley Street. And then Connery's problem was, after the success of Dr. No, he didn't know if he could go on and act in further Bond movies, but somehow Laing cured him of this stage fright, and so the greatest James Bond, we have Laing to thank for that also. But, anyway, thanks for listening.
Our last speaker, last but not least. I thought you were getting stage fright, you weren't going to come up there. No, that wouldn't happen. Adrian Laing, my brother, is a practicing advocate and a qualified barrister. Adrian has written extensively on a wide range of media-related topics over the years, and the author of Unveiling Life. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you, Karen. Me get stage fright. You know, I didn't sort of try to prepare a speech this time because I don't want to get a reputation for just standing up winging it. You know, what am I saying next? No, what I decided to do was to think of who else was born on the 7th of October, because I was quite confident that I would find in that research a whole list of world-class intellectuals comparable with the great R.D. Laing. So my list starts with today, birthday, Alicia Dixon, Jane Tourville, Clive James, Vladimir Putin, Desmond Tutu, and Simon Cowell. So who says he's not in good company? What I really wanted to do today was to bring home the opportunity of connecting up where my father lived, not just to our Beg Street, but what I wanted to do, and I did it earlier today, was to connect up in my own mind his family circumstances, not just our Beg Street, but Govan Hill, because you only have to go across the road and you come to Westmoreland Street, and that's just across the road from Calder Street to our Beg Street, and that's where his father's family came from. And then if you go a bit further down Calder Street, you come to Took Street, and that's where his mother's family came from, the Kirkwoods. And that little world, I mean, I thought I'd give myself half an hour to do the walk. It takes 5 minutes. And that was his world for many, many years. And it never ceases to amaze me, and it's not something which I'm saying in any way that seeks to undermine Govan Hill or Glasgow. But if you think of how small his world was, and how restricted his world was, and there were people that in those days could be born and die and live in a 2-3 mile radius and never extend beyond that. And the father, for some reason, had some driving ambition that he wanted to go out in the world and he wanted to show people what he was capable of. And what he really discovered, which started, I would say, probably about when he was 15, he broke his wrist playing rugby. That meant that he could neither play rugby nor do his piano lessons. So he had free time, and he spent months in Govan Hill Library reading all the books, as Ian said, that were there at the time. And that was when he got this ferocious appetite for reading other minds that he felt that he could connect to. I'll just say as an anecdote that as I was coming back up the road, I went into Govan Hill Library, and I must be like that guy J.P. Hart, whoever he is. I said, you got any books by R.D. Laing in the library? Who's he? Who's he? I said, well, that's not the point. Have you got any books of R.D. Laing in the library? No, we haven't. So I got my book and I said, would you mind putting this book in your library and catalogue it? But it was funny because the old boy, I mean, the guy my age, he didn't know who he was, but there was a younger one who's probably buried somewhere in this audience on his lunch break, he nearly fainted. Oh, Laing, was he? Yes, I said, well, no, Beg Street, we're having a plaque unveiling. And so it's something that I come across quite often, where people either don't know anything about him at all, or practically faint when their connection. And I'd like to do a reappraisal of what my father contributed to the world, and the humanitarian influence that he had, the way people are treated when they are at zero power and have got nothing to do other than the treatment to their own world, and rely entirely on the goodwill, humanitarian reaction of people to how they behave and the state of mind they find themselves in. And I think forever we've got a gratitude in that respect. Finally, I'd like to say that it's not just a sort of indulgent exercise of understanding the relationship between our Beg Street and West Street and Gartook Street, because when you understand his world, how they related to each other and to their own families, you will find in that analysis the answers to the question, what drove him to understand human relationships, what's behind the divided self, self and others. And particularly interpersonal perception, to me, is a book which is often overlooked, but it's a book which seeks to understand how people relate to each other. And it was that intensity that was in his mind that comes back to where he was born, which was Govan Hill. And that's where we are today. And I'm not going to let you off that easily, because what we're going to do now is very kindly to get from Glasgow University, thank you David Weston, digitizing and putting into a CD form 2-3 songs which we're now going to play. And in there was a shop where you could go into, and you could pay, I think it was quite a lot of money in those days, about 5 shillings, and you could actually record there and then somebody singing. On this LP, my grandfather, Ronnie's father, David, singing, and on the piano is, by my best analysis, a 50-year-old Ronnie Laing. So, cue the music, and thank you very much.